Rising above the Ardeatino quarter on Via Appia Antica in Rome, Italy, are the Hypogeum Cemetery known as the Catacombs of San Sebastiano. There aren't many Christian cemeteries like this one, and it has always been open to the public. The top level, which was formerly 4 stories tall, is now nearly entirely demolished. Catacombs, an old Greek word meaning close to the cavity, kata plus kimbe, was the common name for the catacombs in antiquity. An obvious depression in the earth may still be seen today along the Appian Way, near the cemetery. In addition, the territory was formerly home to pozzolan mines, which are currently located around 10 meters above the floor of the Basilica of San Sebastiano, fuori le mura. These mines gave birth to a pagan cemetery, which was later utilized by Christians. Over time, the term catacombas was expanded and assimilated to refer to all hypogeum burial places, which are now commonly known as catacombs. In the 3rd century, the subterranean cemetery began to be known as In Memory Apostolorum, a toponym that denoted the presence of the remains of the apostles Peter and Paul beneath the catacomb. It had been named di San Sebastiano from the early Middle Ages. The recurrence of Peter in catacombas and Paul on Via Ostiensis are discussed in the Depositio Martyrum, which dates back to the second part of the 4th century, and specifically to June 29th. Similarly, in the 5th century, the Martyrologium Hieronymianum mentions Peter's return to the Vatican, Paul's journey over the Via Ostiensis, and the appearance of Tusco and Basso before the council. The burial site on the Appian Way is said by ancient writers to have been visited by 3 martyrs: Eutychius, Quirinus, and Sebastian. Notula Oliorum, a catalogue from the 7th century, lists the names of the martyrs. Nevertheless, pilgrims' itineraries from the early Middle Ages exclude Eutychius because of how difficult it was to access the tomb. Regarding Sebastian, his burial in catacombas on January 20th is remembered in the Depositio Martyrum. According to St. Ambrose, who lived at the end of the 4th century, he was born in Milan and died as a martyr in Rome during the persecution of Diocletian. The 5th century Passio states that he was a soldier from Narbonne in Gaul, who was born into a Milanese family and died in Rome at the hands of Diocletian. Very little else is known about him. His remains were originally housed in the catacomb, but were relocated inside the town walls in the 9th century. They are presently held in the Chapel of Saint Sebastian, which is located in the basilica above the cemetery, on the Appian Way once again. Pilgrims from the area of Seschia, in Pannonia, carried the remains of the Bishop Quirinus to Rome Sommatim during the 4th and 5th century. The only thing we know about Eutychius is that his tomb was found during 20th century excavations in a crumbling section of the catacombs. A poem dedicated to him by Pope Damasus is currently on display at the entrance of the basilica. The 3-story galleries that house the catacombs were able to have their topography and architectural history reconstructed by excavations that took place at the tail end of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th centuries. In what was once a pozzolan mine, the area was deserted at the end of the 2nd century and used by the Romans as a pagan burial ground. Here, in the so-called piazzola, little square, a circular compartment that had been an open-cast mine, were dug 3 mausoleums, along with simple graves for slaves and freedmen. The 3rd. It is possible that Christians were laid to rest in these mausoleums at a later date, given they include Christian iconographies like the anchor and the fish, especially in the so-called Mausoleum of Innocentiores. During this time, excavations for the piazzola and the burial galleries also began. The whole piazzola was filled in to form an embankment at a higher level about the middle of the 3rd century. On this shelf, 3 artifacts have been discovered: a covered area with a well for water drawing, a marble-upholstered edicule that served as a storage space for the apostles' relics while they were transported in catacombs, and the so-called triclea, a covered porticoed hall used for burial banquets, whose walls bear over 600 graffiti invocations to Peter and Paul. The transference of the apostles' relics from their original locations at the beginning of the 4th century to San Sebastiano in the middle of the 3rd century is a subject that academics and archaeologists continue to argue over.
Baveno, a picturesque lakeside village in Italy, was a popular destination for British people during the 19th century. It was home to various notable figures such as John Ruskin, Queen Victoria, Crown Prince Frederick of Germany, Winston Churchill, and Field Marshal Sir Jan Smuts. In the 1920s, Baveno was the site of the murder of Hitler's Leibstandarte SS leader, who was executed in the area. Sir John Ruskin promoted Baveno 4 times before 1850, making it more accessible to British travellers. He studied art and architecture in Baveno while researching modern painters' second book on Italy. In 1849, Ruskin returned to Baveno with his wife Effie and rode the Simplon Pass from Brig in Switzerland to Domodossola and down the Ossola Valley to Lake Maggiore for 12 hours before trains reached Baveno. Another British businessman, Charles Henfrey, also promoted Baveno as a British vacation destination. He and George Clark Pauling founded Manchester's Messrs. Pauling and Henfrey in 1843, a construction, contracting, brickmaking, and wood merchanting enterprise. They won contracts for the Manchester, Bury, and Rosendale Railways Clifton, and Bury and Rawtensall sections, but were fired for Sabbath breaches in 1844. The family enterprise employed Charles Henfrey, son of a famous British railway engineer, who built Manchester brick bridges, tunnels, and viaducts. Henfrey's brother Charles and George loved Italian railway expansion, and their firm Jackson, Brassey and Henfrey obtained the Turin-Susa railway line contract. The Mont Cenis pass between Savoy and Piemonte crossed Susa, and railroads connected Susa to Turin. When Italy unified, Henfrey and Brassey built the Delhi-Punjab Railway, which was launched by the Viceroy on November 1, 1868. Henfrey praised the railway's advantages for Punjab and British military rule over India. Henfrey also bought additional Baveno for India and founded Giorgio Henfrey and Company in Muggiano, Italy. Henfrey hired London architect William Allen Boulnois to build a neo-Gothic home in 1,870 named after his second wife Clara, whom he married in India. His vast Italian art collection included paintings from Italian Jacobin General Teodoro Lecce, a military advisor to King Carlo Alberto of Sardinia. After hearing of Henfrey's house and art collection, the Queen Victoria aide-de-camp requested a secret visit, and Henfrey hosted the Queen for gratis. Victoria visited Villa Clara in 1879 as Balmoral Countess. After 18 years of widowhood, Victoria lost her second daughter Alice in 1878 and took her youngest Beatrice as her mother's secretary. The royal party left Windsor, sailed to Cherbourg aboard the royal yacht, and took the train to Italy via Paris. After Ruskin's death, Victoria visited Italy, where she learned that France Savoy ad Nice had been granted to fight Austria. As promised, Henfrey's railroad sent French soldiers to Italy, and Italian unification gave Umberto kingdom-wide power. In summary, Baveno played a significant role in the lives of prominent figures during the 19th century. Its popularity and the development of the railway system contributed to its continued significance in the history of Italy. Queen Victoria temporarily stays at Mr. Henfrey's wife's Villa Clara, a luxurious palace in Italy that houses the Queen, Princess Beatrice, and 2 ladies. The villa features white Baveno stone, red bricks, zinc and slate roof, Venetian scagliola flooring, and Venetian scagliola flooring. The palace is decorated with white and gold brocade walls, mosaic floors, magnificent Indian and Chinese hangings, sumptuous furniture, Japanese vases, Sèvres porcelain, huge mirrors, photographs, oddities, musical instruments, and more for royal leisure. The villa's hidden beauty is the English church with stunning views from every window and balcony. The Pisan octagon boasts stunning archivolts, marble, gold, and mosaics depict Venice's St. Mark's, while Baveno stone bas-reliefs, friezes, and volutes decorate the facade. The Queen enjoys Isola Bella's tropical trees, laurels, tea, and camphor. Milanese nobles send Her Majesty flowers and a lakeside serenade. In October 1887, Queen Victoria hosted guests at Villa Clara, where she was welcomed by King Humbert's brother, the Duke d'Aosta, and the King and Queen Margherita praised her in England. The Italians, whom England supported throughout the Independence and Unification War that concluded with Rome's defeat on September 20th, 1870, dispatched Garibaldi to Queen Victoria. In October 1887, cancer treatment killed Crown Prince Friedrich, who heroically opposed Judenhetze and 1880's German Jewish disenfranchisement. In 1880, Friedrich and Victoria donned Prussian field marshal robes to a Berlin synagogue ceremony to encourage tolerance. Queen Victoria, Frederick's mother-in-law, praised his speech and stated she was delighted her daughter married him, but Junker circles condemned him for backing the Jews. Wilhelm, the Crown Prince's oldest son, viewed him weak and cowardly under British and Jewish administration. Laryngeal cancer changed Friedrich in Italy. Prince Albert and the British Parliament excited liberal Friedrich, who and his wife planned to liberalize Germany by picking liberal ministries and limiting the chancellorship as co-monarchs. Some historians say Frederick's early death ruined German liberalism, while others say he ruled longer and healthier. In minor, war atrocities shattered tranquility. Hauptsturmführer Friedrich Hans Röver's Liebstandarte SS Adolf Hitler, LSSAH, stayed in Hotel Beau Rivage's Villa Fedora on September 13th and 14. Alsace sought Jews, and the Italians preserved faiths and addresses in population records before the Germans confiscated them. Mario Luzzatto, a 1912 graduate, proposed discriminazione, which allowed the Interior Ministry to exclude specific Jews from persecution laws, and transferred Luzzatto and his family to Burton-on-Trent, Staffordshire, as British business director. Pirelli shielded Luzzatto and 7 Jewish executives from racial laws, and offered generous termination packages and relocated workers to safer nations. After Italy declared war on Britain and France on June 10, 1940, the British rounded up UK-based Italians, and Luzzatto tried to revive his UK-expired discrimination request in Italy. He helped Milan's Jewish school in Upili start university-level chemistry studies in 1941. Luzzatto left Pirelli in 1942 due to racist legislation, but the company hired him and examined its history for its 70th anniversary to apologize. He moved his family to Baveno, where he owned Il Castagneto for holidays, as British air raids on Milan mounted. Mario Luzzatto's family and friends convinced him to flee to Switzerland when the LSSAH landed in Baveno. He was arrested and sent to the SSHQ at Hotel La Ripa in Baveno on September 13, 1943. The SS seized Mario's wife Bice Ginesi and her sister Olga, while Maria Grazia and Silvia were dismissed from Milan's Liceo Parini in 1937-38 for breaching racial laws. LSA killed them and other Jews on shore near Villa Ruscello on September 21st. In Röver, Schneller, and Kruger's 1968 Osnabrück trial, several witnesses recounted Villa events. Obersturmführer Karl Schneller searched the Podesta Columella for Villa Fedora, the Sermon family's home, on September 14th or 15. The villa was named after Umberto Giordano, who resided in Palanza across the lake from Luzzatto's. After Giordano and his family relocated to Milan in 1924, Jewish-English millionaire Sir Edmund Gabriel Davis bought the property. Davis gained money mining in South Africa after relocating to the Cape Colony in 1879 and supplied the Admiralty and Ministry of Munitions with essential minerals for Britain and France throughout WWI. He exploited Northern Rhodesia's copper wealth as a British South Africa Company board member after the war. Chilham Castle near Canterbury contained most of his old masters. Vienna-born Emil Sermon was born in 1881 and started a paper import company after writing for a Berlin daily. He married Berlin-based Polish Jew Maria Müller in 1924. German circumstances worsened, so Maria's sister Stefania and mother Julia emigrated to Italy. They resided in Milan until 1940, when Italy declared war on France and Britain bombed Milan. Villa Fedora was leased by Sermon, and his family lived there until the LSSAH. After Liebstandarte SS Adolf Hitler left in October, Austrian and East European Capitano August Burmeister maintained the Feldgendarmerie German. As partisan activity increased, SS Polizei Units 15 and 20 landed at Villa Carbara in Intra and under SSHQ in Monza in early 1944. Unfortunately, Baveno's tragic war continued beyond September 1943. The Franco-Abrami-led Falci del Motorone guerrilla unit climbed from the slopes to Baveno on June 20, 1944, and seized 2 Germans and 3 local fascists for partisans. They killed Hauptmann August Burmeister and GNR Major Francesco by ambushing a Ferriolo car. As punishment, the Germans executed 17 captured partisans in Baveno's lakeside Piazza dell'Imbarcadero on June 21, 1944. They were captured in Intra after Valgrande and Canobina. The partisans were buried together in Baveno after being abandoned on the coast. After the Germans left, the 6th South African Armored Division HQ moved to Baveno, where they battled their way from Italy's heel to Monte Cassino, Siena, Lucca, and the Po Valley. After Milan's liberation, the U.S. Fifth Army's 6th Armored Division divided between Turin, Liguria, and Aosta. South African General Everard Poole moved into a home after losing 1,100 and chose a coastal property with a boat dock and living room steps between Stresa and Baveno. Field Marshal Jan Smuts visited Baveno, where he presided over a San Francisco Opera House UN General Assembly meeting and penned the UN Charter's preamble in South Africa. Germany attempted Lake Maggiore, Schneller, Rover, and Kruger in 1968 Osnabrück after the war. After a fair trial, they were convicted but acquitted on technicalities. The Italians lost their war crimes files and freed numerous perpetrators due to ineptitude or apathy. U.S. prisoners taught Argentina and Chilean dictatorships terror.
Is home to one of the most haunted locations in all of Italy, if you are unaware of this fact. The island of Poveglia, which is made up of 3 smaller islands, is just that. Because there are so many rumors and stories that circulate about this island, it may be difficult to determine what is real and what is fabricated when it comes to this particular island. Poveglia is made up of 3 islands, 2 of which were produced by natural processes, while the 3rd island is designed to look like Venice by using wooden pillars and layers of dirt. There is one island that is completely covered in flora, another island that is home to the primary structures, and the smallest of the islands is an octagon that serves as a tiny fort to secure the island and function as a fort before arriving in Venice. Poveglia is a sailing vessel that may be seen drifting off the southwest corner of Lido di Venezia. There are just a few modest structures on the main island, which is completely deserted, that are still standing on the island today. The first people to settle on the island arrived in the 7th century, and throughout the course of the subsequent centuries, it developed into a tranquil, small village that stayed away from invasions that occurred on the mainland. Because they avoided the mainland, they were also fortunate enough to avoid paying taxes, which resulted in the creation of a very happy society. The Italian peninsula was mostly avoided by them, although they did engage in commerce with Palestrina, which was located close. The Chioggia War, which took place in the 14th century and was a protracted struggle between the maritime republics of Genoa and Venice, resulted in the island being abandoned. After that, the population was moved to the central region of Venice, primarily to the island of Giudecca. The Republic of Venice did not bring it back to use as a storage facility until the 18th century. Prior to then, it had been used for various purposes. In the years that followed, in the year 1776, it was brought under the authority of the local public health office. In the beginning, it was used for the purpose of controlling customs, but later on, it was repurposed as a location for controlling disease. During the year 1793, 2 ships that were halted for inspection were found to contain many instances of the plague. As a result, they were compelled to remain here, and from that point on, the island became a quarantine station for the plague. As a result of the fact that the other 2 islands in Venice that serve as quarantine, Lazzaretto Nuovo and Lazzaretto Vecchio, were both at capacity, patients were transferred to Poveglia. In spite of the fact that the epidemic had receded, it continued to serve as a quarantine station for ships that were traveling to Venice. Over the course of the 20th century, it was converted into a facility that housed a mental health facility. Currently, the island is controlled by the government and is absolutely devoid of any inhabitants. On the other hand, there have been many attempts made to sell it to private owners. To put it another way, this is one of the rumors that are circulating. Because of the large number of people who had died as a result of the plague, the hospital was at a loss for how to dispose of the dead, so they decided to burn them. In spite of the fact that this seems to be sensible, research reveals a different picture. There were around 100,000 casualties, and rather than being burnt, they were placed in what are known as plague pits. The actual number of victims varies, although it seems that most of them were burned. Trying to determine which version of the tale is more terrifying is a difficult task. Tens of thousands of people lost their lives on the island, and their corpses were left there thereafter, regardless of the manner in which the bodies were disposed of. The director of the facility is said to have gone insane and leaped from the clock tower, according to a different narration of the tale. It was not the leap that led to his death, as the tradition goes, but rather a mystery fog that was responsible for his passing. In addition to being renowned for being somewhat mad, this physician was also notorious for conducting experiments on patients, which included executing a number of lobotomies. On the other hand, despite the fact that you could come across this tale quite often in a variety of different narratives about Poveglia, it was originally first presented in American television shows such as Ghostbusters. Despite the fact that there was an asylum on the island, there is no evidence to substantiate the presence of such a doctor on the island, nor is there any record of an attempt to commit suicide. According to yet another mythology about the island, the inmates of the mental institution would often see the specters of the epidemic, and the sufferers would feel even more tormented as a result of these experiences. It is sad that these legends cannot be substantiated in their entirety. Hence, it continues to be yet another enigma surrounding Poveglia Island. Although there are many legends that are exaggerated, there is one thing that can be said with absolute certainty. For such a tiny island, an extremely high number of people have lost their lives here. The horrors of the plague, the wars of Venice and Napoleon that were fought on and around the island, or even the passage of time spent in a mental institution, might have contributed to the development of this condition. Looking at the area that has been abandoned and the buildings that have been demolished, it is impossible not to feel the burden of the patients who formerly resided on this island and to think about the tragic history of the island. In the region of Rimini, the Montebello Castle, which is sometimes referred to as the Azzurrina Castle, is situated on a hill that is 436 meters in height. Given its lofty elevation, the house not only has a commanding presence over the community of Montebello di Toriana, but it also provides a panoramic view of the whole plain. In 1186, the Malatesta family became the new proprietors of the castle, and during their tenure, they undertook a comprehensive restoration that resulted in the construction of a well-fortified military stronghold. After then, in the year 1463, it was bequeathed to the Guidi di Bagno family by Pope Pius II from his testament, and it is still in the possession of that family to this day. The Guidi di Bagno family, who had been responsible for the damage that occurred during the Second World War, repaired the castle in the year 1989. In addition to the safe, the tower, the feudal cells, the hidden tunnels, and the defensive traps are all still there today. All of these structures date back to the medieval era. While exploring the inside of the Montebello Castle, you will discover that parts of the old furniture and walls have been preserved. There is a story that is associated with this castle that tells of a little girl named Gwendolina. The following is how legend has it. On June 21st, 1375, Gwendolina, the daughter of a feudal lord of Montebello, vanished in the gravel of the ancient citadel, and neither her whereabouts nor her disappearance have ever been discovered. The following is an example of how Gwendolina was portrayed in certain stories from the 17th century. She had sky-colored eyes and light hair with blue reflections. This is where the nickname Azurina, which literally translates to light blue, originates from. When Gwendolina was born, she was truly born with albinism, a disease that was considered to be of a malevolent nature at that time period. For the purpose of protecting the kid from the biases of other people, her father confined her behind the walls of the fortress, where she was closely monitored by 2 guards. On the 21st of June, Azurina was playing in the fortress with a ball of rags during a heavy storm. Her father was engaged in war distant from the castle at the time. During the course of the game, the ball ended up falling into the icebox of the castle, and Gwendolina walked inside to collect the ball. The security personnel would have been able to hear a scream emanating from the gravel at this point. But when they entered the sole route in, they could not find either the ball or the kid. Legend has it that the spirit of Azurina is still present in the fortress, and that it is said to make its presence known at the summer solstice, which occurs once every 5 years each time. Over the course of the last several years, the castle has been the subject of a number of investigations and recordings which have uncovered a variety of noises. When you get to the castle, you will have the opportunity to go down the last hallway, which is where Azurina was playing ball before she vanished into the icebox. You will also have the opportunity to listen to the recordings, the interpretation of which will, of course, be tied to the ideas of people who listen to them. The old rock that shows up on maps as early as 1191, near the town of Poppi, in the province of Arezzo, stands the castle of Conti Guidi. Guests of the castle include Dante Alighieri and Taddeo Gaddi, a disciple of Giotto. Now, the bottom floor houses a historical museum commemorating the 1289 Battle of Campaldino between the Guelphs Florentines and Ghibellines of Arezzo. The basement, however, is where the building's most intriguing features lie. It was here that hundreds of innocent people perished in violent storms, and it is also where the story of the beautiful but vicious Matilda is said to have originated. Legends about infected castles often have strong female protagonists who are either wicked, adulterous, or defiant. This is likely due to the fact that many of these tales originate from a time when the church had a greater impact on society, leading many to believe that women were inherently bad and to blame for men's problems. Now we may return to our quest to learn the story of this beautiful but deadly lady whose spectre lingers in her home even after she has done her part to stop the suffering and death she caused. Countess Guidi's wife, Matilda, was the most influential man in Poppi's court. Legend has it that the beauty of this woman roused the fury of the Guidi family, who ruled the region at the time, as many sought her out. Everyone in the Casentino region talked about her, even if she had nothing to do with it. The castle gentleman was a strict and cruel man, known across Tuscany for punishing anyone who dared to look up at her bride cruelly, but everyone dreamed of having her. There were a lot of people who wanted to see what the seniorships were up to in the castle because of the woman's hidden beauty. In fact, some people even hired hostages just to spy on Matilda and relay that information to the Spassiments. The guy was compelled to depart and abstain from the castle for weeks due to several political and military obligations. It was the perfect moment to make your way to the castle and attempt to win over the stunning Castellana. In contrast, the stunning Matilda began to feel like a caged bird after enduring the first days of isolation. Her father orchestrated her marriage to a guy who was much older than she was and, in the opinion of many, was downright unattractive. Even though she did not love him, she found that spending so much time alone at the castle was more punishing than being in his presence. She started dating men at a young age and had a string of shrewd affairs. He hired minstrels to liven up his evenings, knights to keep her apprised of what was happening at the borders of her possessions, messengers to deliver letters to her husband, tailors to make her the most exquisite garments, and merchants and craftsmen to give her the best of everything she wanted. This was Matilda's way of coping with the lack of a castle lord on multiple occasions. However, there was still an issue. Gossip about Mr. Poppy's mistress would have ended not only their wealthy marriage, but also her own life, so she couldn't let it spread around the village, no matter how much she loved those passionate evenings of love. It was simple for her to figure out how to escape the guys who were still captivated by her after their passionate night together. The plan was the same every time. First thing in the morning, she would urge her boyfriend to leave the castle by a subterranean corridor, claiming it was a hidden escape. The actual destination of the path was a shadowy tunnel, beset with obstacles adorned with jagged spikes and swords. Every guy who was rewarded with the body of the lovely Matilda lost his own falling down a deep hole and stayed impaled at the bottom. The stickers were very high, and not even the most nimble lover could escape that horrible trap. Tragically, the number of disappearances in that region spiked to the point that the Castellana could no longer be ignored. The people of Poppy resolved to attack the castle when the final young man failed to come home. They captured Matilda when they lowered the door while Mr. Poppy was out with his men. Angry crowds dragged the Castellana to the tower's top and walled it alive, leaving the few remaining soldiers with no choice than to surrender. The days of lovely Matilda came to a close just like that. Many still hold the belief that his spirit has not yet rested and is lost somewhere in the halls and chambers of Poppy's castle. From the window of the Poppy castle, several inhabitants assert that they saw the most stunning lady in the Casentino, shrouded in white with an enduringly attractive countenance. Some have even gone so far as to say that, while at the museum, they experience a buzzing sensation on the neck that makes them shiver with both cold and pleasure, as well as hear a soft, suggestive voice. Is the stunning Matilda still on the hunt for a brief encounter with a stunning young man? Bidding-looking wayside house can be found in the hamlet of Voltri, which is located in the Liguria region of northwest Italy. This building comes with a dark past that would not be out of place in a narrative written by Edgar Allan Poe. During the Middle Ages, the mountain path was used by pilgrims, soldiers, and merchants. Casa delle Anime served as a handy halting station for these individuals, since it was one of the few residences in the region that provided a safe haven for travelers who were exhausted and hungry. On the other hand, hospitality came at a significant cost. It is said that affluent travelers would be invited to deposit their goods in a chamber that was hidden away and could only be accessible via a hidden corridor. Every night, the movable ceiling of their chamber would collapse, causing the unfortunate traveler to choke to death. This would happen throughout the night. The corpse of the deceased would subsequently be laid to rest in a communal burial located at the rear of the property. The circumstance is comparable to that of the Ostrich Inn, which is located in Colnbrook, Berkshire, in the United Kingdom. The bloodthirsty landlord known as Jarman would toss affluent clients from a hinged bed through a trapdoor into a pot of boiling liquid below, in a manner similar to that of Sweeney Todd. This phenomenon occurred in the 17th century. For whatever reason, the violent family who resided in Casa delle Anime was ultimately apprehended and put to death. Since that time, people avoided the home because they believed it was cursed and infested by ghosts. It was not until the conclusion of World War II that it was once again inhabited. During the year 1944, the region was subjected to heavy bombardment by the Germans. As a result of the bombing, a family was rendered homeless and was in dire need of a place to live. They sought sanctuary in the dangerous dwelling place. They said that doors opened and closed on their own, that dishes moved of their own volition, and that there were dreadful sounds emanating from the garden. One evening, they were visited by a young girl dressed in a white dress, and this was the moment when everything came to a head. It seemed like she was seeking for her partner, who had gone missing. As she slowly disappeared, the only scent that was left was that of flowers. As a result of this, the family decided to leave, since it was the last straw. There have been discussions of renovating the structure ever since that time. A corpse was reportedly discovered buried in the garden in the 1950s, and it was wrapped in a jute bag at that time. In addition, the home has become a popular haunt, sorry about that, among those who are interested in ghost hunting. In recent years, one visitor has reported seeing a peculiar white form crossing the road in front of him in the vicinity of the house. Construction of Castello della Rotta took place in the 11th century, although it is possible that the original building dates back much farther. The Romans were the first people to possess it, and they constructed the fortified castle in order to guard the bridge that crossed the Banner stream. Due to the fact that the Roman road Palenzo passed via the bridge, the Romans placed a higher value on it. Following the departure of the Romans, the fortress was acquired by the Knights Templar, who controlled it for a period of more than 300 years. In the years that followed, it was occupied by a number of different proprietors and was the site of two terrible wars, 1639 and 1706. It is said that the castle was constructed on top of a ley line, which heightens the quantity of energy that is associated with the paranormal. Towards the end of the 20th century, the castle was abandoned to deteriorate and was used as a landfill for materials that were no longer needed for building. As a result of the deterioration and the fact that it was located in an isolated area, people began to refer to it as the haunted house or the castle of fear. Avoiding the castle was a goal for the locals. After a number of decades, things began to show signs of improvement for the castle. The fact that it had been the residence of the Knights Templar in the past gave it the historical significance that it deserved. After being cleaned up and refurbished, Castello della Rotta was reopened. However, they subsequently came upon something that was rather gruesome. People made a disturbing discovery when they were working on the renovation. Several bones were discovered, one of which was that of a knight who had been buried with his horse. There was a big iron cross that was worn around the man's neck, which suggested that this individual may have been a Templar knight. Castello della Rotta is said to be the site of several ghost stories and folklore. However, it is difficult to verify these tales since the castle is now privately held and is not accessible to the general public. The skeletal remains that they discovered are directly related to one of the ghost sightings that they have had. There are many who assert that the grounds are haunted by a knight riding a horse who is armed. In the year 1400, a priest was found guilty of planning heinous acts and was condemned to death. In spite of the fact that he was executed for his schemes, he is still seen strolling about the grounds of the castle with his head in his hands. In addition, the castle is haunted by a beautiful blonde lady. According to the rumors, she took her own life because she was in a marriage that was both violent and unpleasant. The spirits of a guy clad in black and a cardinal who is reading are two further ghosts. The grounds of the castle are also the location of a yearly ceremonial procession of spirits that takes place on the evening of June 12th and 13. There are, however, a few legends that exist as well. An example of one of the most common sightings is that of the ghost of a monk wearing a cowl. A lovely noblewoman is said to have fallen in love with a prior owner and nobleman, according to their legend. An assault by the Saracens took place on the day of their wedding, which resulted in the ceremony being cruelly interrupted. The young bride was pursued by a few of these guys until she reached the top of the tower. The only way for her to get away from her assailants was to leap from the tower, which was her only alternative. The nobleman battled the invaders throughout the night, but when he saw the dead corpse of his love, he made the decision to depart for the Holy Land and become a Templar monk in order to exact retribution on all of the non-believers who were guilty for the death of the person he loved the most in its entirety. He continues to wander the castle in search of the people who murdered the woman he loved. In the distant past, Castello della Rotta was the residence of a mischievous little boy. It was difficult for his nanny to deal with him since he would not listen to her and made several attempts to get away from her. Up until the day when he managed to get away from her once again, she did a wonderful job of keeping him out of trouble, which was her duty. She had been searching the whole castle and its environs, and she was going to take a breather in the courtyard when she suddenly saw the tiny plague, who was smirking brazenly at her. She had been looking everywhere. Suddenly, she became enraged and yelled at the little kid. He was taken aback by this, and by the time he turned around to run again, he was struck by a horse-drawn carriage, which resulted in his instantaneous death. In a state of complete disbelief, the nanny made her way to the kitchen, where she then committed herself. The castle is haunted by both the kid and the nanny at this same moment. Spectres, phantoms, demons, and witches. What is your level of faith in the supernatural? Do you believe that there are other forces at work in our planet, maybe something that we do not completely comprehend at this point in time? When wandering about an abandoned location, such as this abandoned and potentially haunted monastery in Sicigliano, Italy, even the most ardent of all skeptics could experience a little bit of uncertainty. The Italian peninsula is home to a large number of abandoned religious structures, including monasteries, convents, and abandoned churches. However, in comparison to the majority of other haunted convents, this specific one in Sicigliano stands out. As a result of its long-standing link with the supernatural, it is entrenched in the mythology and tales of the local community. For a very long time, there have been rumors that the monastery is plagued by ghosts and demons. Community members have referred to this structure as the Convent of the Devil's Monks for a considerable amount of time. Reported sightings of the spectre of a monk are the subject of a number of folk tales as well as contemporary testimonies. Within the monastery, the ghost continues to recite songs as it wanders around the dimly lit, shadowy halls, vacant passageways, and deteriorating surroundings. It is possible that the eerie reputation of this monastery in Sicigliano, which is said to be haunted, dates back to the 1600s. This was a challenging period for Italy, as well as for the majority of Europe. In addition to the fact that the Spanish occupiers were persecuting the native people, this was also a time when danger and sickness were prevalent. During that time period, a guy who was roaming from place to place found himself at the door of the monastery, requesting hospitality. The monks were delighted to have the guy, but with the condition that he would join them and accept the vows, they were content with his presence. The guy, who had no other choice, decided to accept their offer and become a monk, since he had no other choice. Despite this, he rapidly reverted back to his previous behaviors. The guy allowed himself to get enamored with a stunning young lady from the neighborhood and began an unlawful connection with her. There was a way for the other monks to learn about it, and they were not pleased with it. The young lady was subjected to severe punishment. due to the fact that she was suspected of being a witch and having seduced an innocent monk. She was burnt alive. A pardon was granted to the individual, on the other hand. As long as he made a commitment to live a life of monastic chastity, he was allowed to return to the monastery and get back into the community. According to the narrative, the guy was unable to endure the anguish, and it ultimately led to his death, since it engulfed him to the point of death. As he took his last breath, the guy uttered a curse on the convent and all of the people who were residing there. The monks eventually perished in a manner that was dreadful. All of the people eventually went, and they never came back. It is likely that the haunted convent at Sicignano is considerably newer than the mythology suggests. According to the story, it would have already been an established monastery by that time. The convent dates back to the 1500s. Through the years and right up to the 20th century, it continued to thrive and do great things. Additionally, it was converted into a school and a college, but in 1973, it was terminated from its operations. The government, which owns the haunted convent in Sicignano, made unsuccessful attempts to convert it into a school via the use of the building. Currently, it serves as a wonderful example of a genuine medieval convent, and it provides visitors with some thrilling things to see as they make their way through its hallways and rooms. In the present day, it is possible to see flora that is growing all over the buildings, in addition to a number of acts of vandalism which may have been performed by the bored adolescents in the neighborhood. Given all of the myths that surround this location, it is not hard to think that it would be a favorite hangout for young people who are looking for an exciting experience. It is possible that the church itself is one of the most captivating aspects of the monastery. It is still possible to find a stunning altar in the main chamber. A few of the hues and the paint that are on the walls may be made out under close inspection. On the other hand, the majority of it is deteriorating and is going away. At the very least, this is what the ghost story claims about the convent in Sicignano, which is said to be haunted. There was a Benedictine monastery in Milan called the Monastery of Santa Radegonda, which shared its name with the nearby church. Located on the present-day Via Santa Radegonda, the complex was suppressed and mostly demolished in 1781 to make way for it. During its heyday, when it had 4 cloisters, including San Raffaele and San Simplicianino, it was breathtaking. According to monastic legend, the church, which was twice as big as it is now, was meant to store a number of artifacts. This collection only includes a fragment of the true cross, a thorn from Christ's crown, and a fragment of the veil that Mary and Mary Magdalene wore. The crumbling structure may be in bad shape, yet it has many interesting stories and even a ghost. Famous Milanese White Lady Bernardo Visconti's spectre is at issue here. His deeds and the many tales about him that have been handed down through the ages would have brought him great fame. Bernardo Visconti, daughter of Bernabo Visconti, sought out distractions in her life after her marriage to a man she hated. Contrarily, she found them in a young man who, as the tale goes, reciprocated her feelings without delay. However, the story did not remain hidden for long, which went against what the two lovers had planned. The kid was publicly beheaded after Bernabo accused him of stealing. He was tortured to make him confess to a crime he had never committed. The same punishment was meted out to Bernarda. The fact that she had been unfaithful led to her death by hunger in the worst kind of solitary incarceration imaginable. According to those who have seen her spectrum in action, this torment would provide light on why they have gone through so much misery. A small person with a moon-pale, gaunt face, brown hair streaked with tawny, and a black robe encircles the scene. Observers who have laid eyes on her have always noted the same characteristics.